Terrence Crawford does not want Errol Spence to become undisputed, and not for reasons that y'all think. Let's get into it.
Straighter, not roundhouse right hand.
And that's what we've been talking about. The straight shot is the one where he gets leverage on it.
I don't want to kill
Pull
somebody
back
for
a little bit.
seconds.
Nah, I want a body on my record.
Now, I want to see you fight motherfuckers. I do. All right? I'm with you. I'm with you. As long as you're trying to fight the great, the best competition.
Welcome to the graveyard. Click the link if you dare to. Bury you alive, I'm prepared to. Welcome to the graveyard. You get your sources from clowns, so when you come around, we don't hear you. Welcome to the graveyard. Click the link if you dare to. Bury you alive, I'm prepared to. Welcome to the graveyard. You get your sources from clowns, so when you come around, we don't hear you. Yo, it's the best, fight the best. If you ain't with the moto, just click the link, bitch, and get buried like the rest. It ain't gonna work how you want it. These trolls already tried, too many come but don't leave. So if you here, you gotta die. I'm spitting straight facts. These bitches crying cause they hate that. The LDBC's the top topic, bitch, hate that. We the ones that bring the truth to these fans. So while you hate, I'ma laugh and keep counting these bands. Welcome to the graveyard. Click the link, get the dance. Bury you alive, I'm prepared to. Welcome to the graveyard. You get your sources from clowns, so when you come around, we don't hear you. Welcome to the graveyard. Click the link if you dare to. Bury you alive, I'm prepared to. Welcome to the graveyard. You get your sources from clowns, so when you come around, we don't hear you.
Welcome to the graveyard.
Terrence Bud Crawford, the man with all the accolades and all the claim to fame, and if the man was to retire today, he'd be in the Hall of Fame, has said he's not fighting Errol Spence after claiming that is the only fight he wants. He doesn't want to fight Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman is clout chasing. Yeah, Danny Garcia priced himself out. Who is your Dennis Ugas? Sean Porter's he lost to all of his top level fights. He lost to them. Virgil Ortiz really doesn't want to fight him. Jaron Boots Ennis is a prospect. He's not ready. Who is Speedy Rashidi Ellis? The only fight out there for Terrence Bud Crawford, the only fight is Errol Spence Jr. It's the only fight. Yet he fights Green Beans. Yet he fights Jose Benavidez in a voluntary. Yet he fights Amir Khan in a voluntary. So you can fight fighters in voluntaries that Danny Garcia beat, that Sean Porter would destroy, that Keith Thurman would embarrass. You can fight those guys, but you can't fight Keith Thurman. You can't fight Sean Porter. You can't fight Virgil Ortiz, Jaron Boots Ennis. You can't fight none of them. The only fighter for you is Errol Spence. It's the only fighter for you. And Bud Dick Riders will make that shit make sense every single time. They'll use well, isn't your name the best fight the best? Don't you want to see the best fight the best? They'll use that excuse every time. Every time they'll use that excuse, every single time. When BFTB has said on multiple occasions, hundreds of times, that there is more than one fighter who equals the best fight in the best. Danny Garcia versus Keith Thurman is the best fight in the best. Danny Garcia versus Sean Porter is the best fight in the best. Jaron Boots Ennis versus Virgil Ortiz is the best fight in the best. So on and so forth. All of those fights are the best fighting the best. The best of the best fighting the best, we believe, is Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford. In all reality, it's more than likely Errol Spence and Keith Thurman. In all reality, it's more than likely Errol Spence and Keith Thurman. I think both of those guys beat Terrence Crawford. I think Errol Spence demolishes Terrence Crawford badly. I think Keith Thurman beats Terrence Crawford. But, people are stuck on, Bud being this whatever y'all are stuck on Bud being on. So for you guys, it's Terrence Bud Crawford versus Errol Spence. That's fine. No problem. That's one of the best fighting the best too. It is the best fighting the best. No problem at all. So then that means that Terrence Bud Crawford should fight nobody else. No one. He shouldn't fight anyone. He should sit on the shelf and wait for Errol Spence. Because you guys are always blaming Errol. Oh, well, Errol, just fight Bud, just fight Bud. Okay, well then Bud shouldn't fight nobody. Right? Right? Bud should just sit on the shelf. Bud should do what Mr. Gary Russell does. I ain't fighting nobody unless it's the top competition. That's what Bud should do, right? He ain't fighting nobody unless it's the number one in the WBO. Never mind. That was Sean Porter. Never mind. So he is not like Mr. Gary Russell either. Because if Mr. Gary Russell, the champion, if the WBC number one was like, I want smoke, he's fighting him. There is nothing else to say. Whatever. So, Terrence Bud Crawford does not want to fight Errol Spence because the accolades excuse is gone. Well, what are you going to say? What are you going to say? If Terrence Bud Crawford fights Errol Spence and gets demolished, what excuse is Bud going to have to say, oh, I'm going to the Hall of Fame? He'll never go to the Hall of Fame, but he's going to destroy you. So whatever accolades you have will go into his back pocket. Terrence Bud Crawford does not want to fight Errol Spence because Terrence Bud Crawford has said he does not want Errol Spence to become undisputed. He's willing to move to 154 so that he can put an asterisk on Errol Spence becoming undisputed. But there will be no asterisk. There will be none. Reason being is because Showtime Sean Porter and Showtime Sean Porter and Virgil Ortiz are 1 and 2, which means they would have to fight for the vacant title. Which means that Errol Spence would either fight Virgil Ortiz or he'd fight Sean Porter in the rematch. He'd fight a Virgil Ortiz who established himself by being number one and then beating Sean Porter. He's establishing himself by being number one and then beating Sean Porter. The same Sean Porter that Errol Spence beat. So WBO champion Virgil Ortiz will be fighting Errol Spence for undisputed in a legitimate fight, in the legitimate best fighting the best. Or Sean Porter, who gave Errol Spence all he could handle, would be fighting for undisputed again in another fight against Errol Spence again. 2 legitimate fights. So it will not be no asterisk because no one is telling Terrence Bud Crawford to move up to 154. That is a claim that he's making. Those are statements that he's saying. He's saying that he's finished with Errol Spence. He's saying he's never fighting Errol Spence. He's saying that fight is done. He's saying he's moved on. That is what he's saying. Errol Spence is not saying that. Terrence Bud Crawford does not want to fight Errol Spence because Errol Spence will destroy him. And if Errol Spence destroys him, all the accolades, all the praise, all the hype, all the Boxing Writers Association's awards, all that lineal status talk, all of that belongs to Errol Spence. Terrence Bud Crawford has dug himself in a hole so deep that the only way to get out of it is to beat Errol Spence or to never fight him. That's it. Those are the only ways to get out of it. Either never fight him, so Bud Dick Riders can say, oh man, if they ever fought, Terrence Crawford would have stopped him. Terrence Crawford would have knocked him out. He would have beat him. He would have destroyed him. Terrence Crawford would have did this. Terrence Crawford would have did that. Or to move up. If he moves up, if he just never fights him, stays at 147 and never fights him, they can always use that. Oh, well, they should have fought a long time ago. It's Errol Spence's fault. They should have fought a long time ago. They can use that excuse. Or they can he can move up and say, oh, well, he's daring to be great. Man, that's Errol Spence's fault. Errol should have fought him a long time ago and blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Terrence Crawford cannot afford, his legacy cannot afford to lose to Errol Spence Jr. That is the reason why he will never fight him. That is the reason why if they do fight, it's going to be because Errol Spence conceded to everything. Errol Spence said, okay, 60-40 in your favor. I'll walk out first with 3 belts. You can walk out last. We'll fight in Omaha. Your mom can be the motherfucking referee. Your sisters can be the judges. Terrence Bud Crawford cannot afford. He cannot afford to lose to Errol Spence. He can't. He cannot. What did he do in his little career? If he beats you, then your entire career goes into his pocket. Even if he fights you, he's already a Hall of Famer right now. He's a unified champion. He will go to the Hall of Fame. If he beats Yordenis Ugas and becomes a 3-belt unified champion, he's solidifying his Hall of Fame status and his legacy. Terrence Crawford cannot afford to lose to Errol Spence. He cannot. He has way too much on the line. Way too much. No big paydays. None of that shit. All of that shit is contingent upon him having the thought process of, I'll beat Errol Spence. All of that. Manny Pacquiao is not fighting no Terrence Crawford. No, who's going to fight you, bro? You bring nothing to the table. Literally nothing. Oh, a WBO belt. So? The motherfuckers that you're trying to fight have all been champions before. They'll be either 2 or 3-time champions. and then the ones that want to fight you, you have more to lose than to gain. You fight Sean Porter. Sean Porter is a 2-time champion already. You fight Keith Thurman. He's a unified champion. Danny Garcia, a multiple division champion. Yordenis Ugas, a champion already. Who are you going to fight? Boots? Okay. Boots has more to gain, and you have more to lose. Speedy Rashidi Ellis, more to gain, and you have more to lose. Virgil Ortiz, more to gain, and you have more to lose. Who are you going to fight? You bring nothing to the table, bro. Literally nothing. Nothing for the Sean Porters, the Yordenis Ugases, the Errol Spences, the Keith Thurmans, the Danny Garcias. Those guys need compensation. They already have titles. It's compensation. And again, for Errol Spence, who wants to become undisputed, he is going to have to give everything. Everything. 50-50 is not going to cut it. It's going to have to be 55-45 in Bud's favor. The fight is going to have to be in a location of Bud's choosing. I'm telling y'all this right now. If Errol Spence beats Yordenis Ugas, the negotiations for Errol Spence to fight Terrence Crawford are going to be insane. The man already set it up already to make it like I moved on. Oh, he played games with me. He did this and he did that. No, he should have been fought me. But you're trying to fight Pacquiao, who you was trying to fight 3 years before you even mentioned Errol Spence. And you're still trying to fight Pacquiao. But yet, Errol played games with you because he said, I'm getting all these belts, then I'm going to fight you. Bro, you should be welcoming that. I want you to understand and listen to this. Terrence Bud Crawford claims that he wants to become undisputed. That's what he claims. I want to be undisputed. But then the only fight you want is Errol Spence. So you're telling Errol Spence to get all 3 belts and then fight you. That's what you're telling him. He's going and doing that. He's literally doing what Bud told him to do. I want you to think about this now. I want you to let this sink in. Bud Crawford and his fans say they don't want to fight Keith Thurman. They don't want to fight Ugas. They don't want to fight Sean Porter. They don't want to fight Boots. They don't want to fight Danny Garcia. They don't want to fight none of these guys. None of them. The only person they want to fight is Errol Spence. And they want undisputed. So they are essentially telling Errol to go get all the other belts and then come back and fight me. He said he's doing that. And they're shitting on him for doing it. Let it sink in. These are facts. This is not a debate. They don't want to fight nobody but Errol. And they want undisputed. When you ask the question, how are you going to become undisputed if you don't want to fight nobody else but Errol? The only way is for Errol Spence to get all the belts and then come back and fight you in one fight. That is the only way for that to happen. That is the only way for everything you want to happen. And the man told you to your face he's doing what you want. He's giving in. Errol Spence is conceding to what you want. He's conceding. Getting all the belts and then fighting you. And right when it's time for that, you're telling the world, you're prefacing it that you're never fighting him. I'm never fighting him, man. Because you know he will fucking destroy you. You know this. I'm never fighting him. That fight's done. It's never going to happen. Because he will beat the shit out of you. You have everything to lose. You have nothing to gain. Nothing. Because you can't beat him. If you could beat him, whole different story. Whole different story. Even your matchmakers know you can't beat him. Which is the reason why they're not putting you against him. Which is the reason why they're not putting you against competition that he fought. Because they know if they put you against a Sean Porter and you lose or you look bad, down goes the stock. If they put you against a Danny Garcia who beat you, then down goes your stock. If you get clipped and dropped by Danny Garcia, down goes your stock. You put you in there against Jerron Boots and you get beat the fuck up, down goes your stock. You have everything to lose and nothing to gain. Although Errol Spence is doing exactly what you told him to do. Pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. But yet, Bud Dick might as well run with this shit. Insane. Terrence Crawford cannot fight Errol Spence. He cannot. He cannot. He will get destroyed. And everything that he built, his accolades, all his gains, are now in Errol Spence's back pocket. He cannot afford to fight Errol Spence. He will duck that man at all costs. BFTB. Shout out to the LDBC. And I'm out.